Ooh, this is my first time doing this, a book review. I'm going to be talking about the books I have read this month, my thoughts on them, and then kind of um, preface the books that are on my reading list for the next month. This month's reading wasn't too bad. I have to count in, I think, the last week of October as well, but I'm doing kind of November reads. Um, The first book that I started with reading was, I read this actually early October, sorry, but I'm gonna go for that too. I reread On the Road by Jack Kerouac. Um, I read this on holiday. I read it about 5 years ago when I was 5, 6 years ago when I was 16. I'm 22 now, so yeah, 6 years ago. And I didn't really get it at the time. And I reread it on holiday, and I have to say, I get it now, but I don't know if I love it. Obviously, this is kind of like a cult book. Um, Everyone knows about it. He's part of the Beat Generation. Um, but just something about it didn't sit with me. I mean, it's very effective in its form, in portraying what it's trying to do, and narrative, because you do genuinely feel like you are on the road the whole time. You feel like you're on this long, tiresome journey, and every time you get somewhere, you're leaving with Jack somewhere else. And it's interesting, it looks at kind of um, classism in America, politics, this kind of what was popular amongst the beat poets and that kind of um, coterie, or like that writing group was kind of being a bit of a nomad. So it's a very nomadic book, its nature, quite literally and metaphorically, in the way that the book assumes its own style. Um, It reminds me of, and I don't know why, but Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. I think that's just kind of because of the dialogue, use of dialogue, and the kind of time and place of it. Um, but yeah, I'm very intrigued by the central character, um, whose name I now can't remember. Is it Sal or something? And you've got all these amazing names in there, and basically he's infatuated by this guy called Dean, who takes like the nomadic, eccentric lifestyle to a whole new level. And Dean is a very interesting, emphatic, kind of attractive character. You want to know more about Dean Moriarty, why he is the way he is, where he's come from, and you always feel like there is a certain distance between you and him, and you never quite get to know him in his full form, nor understand him. And I think it's with Carlo Marx that he has these long, winding conversations into the hours of the early morning, which are just like completely abstract and talking about existence and God and basically anything you can imagine. Um, Kind of like these pseudo geniuses. You're not quite sure if they are geniuses. And I think Sal, I think that's the name of the main character. I can't find it in here. Um, sits, yeah, Sal Paradise sits kind of enviously, and he wishes to have that same intimacy with Dean. And every time you think he's going to get it, he's pushed away. It's a it's a beautiful book. It's very unique. You can appreciate it. It's kind of a one of a kind, even though I've said I felt I read it similarly to Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. It is very unique. I just don't know if it affected me or intrigued me as much as I was expecting it to. That might be because it was my second read, and so things weren't coming across as new to me. But I do think the first time I read it, I didn't really digest it at all. Um, but yeah, the next book I read was, I don't have it because I read it on my Kindle, but The Buddha of Suburbia. by Hanif Qureshi. This was an incredible book. I doing a writing course and we had to read an extract from we had to read the first chapter basically, and I was just immediately taken by it. It's about this guy called Karim, and he's a second generation immigrant. So he was born in Britain, but his father is Indian, his mother is white, and he lives in London. And it's kind of exploring that kind of those diasporas and that kind of sense of belonging, but also not, and not really sure where you are and who you are, and that sense of identity, and kind of it tears away all those ideas of like, in order to be, you feel as though that what Hanif is doing in such a fresh, it's an old book, I think it came out in the 90s, but what he's doing, which is so interesting, is a lot of the time when you read books or literature, non-fiction or not, immigrants or people who aren't white, or feel slightly displaced, and they are made out to be these like beacons of light, these amazing people, and they become quite two-dimensional. And what Qureshi does, which is so interesting, and took me along the whole book, was Karim is perfect by no means. He's a young man exploring his sexuality, exploring drug use, exploring ideas of dreams and who he is. Um, and at no point do you feel like it's a book or a character being pushed by a kind of agenda. And because of that, it's so much more effective in relaying one of the central messages of the book, which is identity, and what does it even mean to be an Englishman? What does it mean to be a person in this world where you live? Um, and yeah, definitely the comedy is one of the best parts of it. It's so funny, so well written. I got a couple of things from the library, um, because I was wow. So I got Intimacy, um, about males. It's about like male sexuality, and then the collected screenplays. He wrote a really famous um like film called My Beautiful Laundrette. It's on there, which was done produced by Working Title Films, which is really interesting. It came full circle because I went to a talk with one of the co-owners of that who produced the film, and that's kind of what got him going. But yeah, The Buddha of Suburbia, I would easily give it a 5 out of 5. Something unlike anything I've read in a really long time, and amazing. And to add to that, I went to Zadie Smith was doing a talk at St. Martin in the Fields on inspiration and ideas, and she spoke about her close relationship with Hanif and kind of how she read The Buddha of Suburbia, and it amazed her that you could do this. And she came from quite a relatively similar background, um, but she was the generation after, and talking about like the violence you experience as a person of color in London and all these things. So yeah, it's very like I have to say, Buddha of Suburbia is like quite a highly sexual book as well. But that only adds to it, I think. I think it's amazing. It's so awkward in the best kind of ways. So yeah, I'd give that a 5 out of 5. 100% one of the best books I've read. The next book I read was actually in September, but as this is what's in the top of my head, so I just grabbed it. This is Kairos by Jenny Erpenbeck. Um, she won the International Booker Prize. It's set between East and West Germany, and kind of follows that. I thought it was really beautiful, kind of romantic novel, which is also quite sad, quite dark. Um, yeah, it's kind of looking at state and sexuality and like individuality and kind of all those barriers that get in the way. And you have the East and West, but then she's also in an age gap relationship, so that becomes like a greater metaphor for her relationship, I guess, and that divide. Um, and as that divide starts to crumble, those lines in East and West Germany, so does her personal life. It's really good. It's definitely worth a reread. I read it in a rush, and I'm actually struggling to remember a lot of information about it, but I thought it was really beautifully written. It's obviously in translation. She's a German author, I believe. Um, but yeah, a great book. An easy like 4.5 out of 5. Then this month I read I Am Pilgrim. This was incredible. And I say that cautiously because when I first, well, I don't say it cautiously, that's amazing, but when I first picked this up, this was obviously kind of like a cult book. When it first came out, I remember seeing everyone reading the book with the fingerprint on. It's a crime thriller. So I haven't read many thrillers, though I should because I enjoy them. But I guess I was being a little bit snobby about it. Um, because I thought, maybe a bit naff, a bit cheesy. And at points in the book, sometimes it's a little bit cheesy. But Scott Murdoch, or um, he goes by many other names in the book, including Pilgrim. But it's an amazing, amazing story. I don't want to say too much about it because I don't want to give it away, but it's kind of um, hmm, I'm trying to put this in a way that doesn't ruin it because it's obviously a thriller, so you need that sense of suspense. It kind of follows the tensions between the Middle East and the US, but also like explores the networks of intelligence in America and like how they function. Um, Obviously, explores a lot like the reasons for people's behaviors, and there is Scott Murdoch's character goes under much exploration throughout the book. Um, there he certainly goes on a much growth, and it's kind of a personal journey for him, even though he's working, I guess. I thought it was beautifully written in parts actually, and you have to hand it to him. It keeps you. It's about it's like 800 and nearly 900 words essentially, and you are pumping along the whole time. There is barely a moment where it drops, which you do get in long big books, but yeah, the energy keeps you going, and it's just an amazing book. You devour it. I devoured it. Really good. The other book was The Vegetarian by Han Kang. She just won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and this is, I think, her most famous piece of work. I've never read any of her other novels, and I picked it up precisely for the fact that she won the Nobel Prize, and I wanted to give it a read, and I'd heard good things. I did enjoy it. I thought it was, her style, her style, her use of language is really evocative and quite beautiful. Um, the kind of exploration of gender roles, human roles, particularly in South Korea, is very interesting. And her use of perspective was pretty amazing. It starts with the husband of the central protagonist, Yong Hai. I don't want to mispronounce it, Yong Hai, I think. And then it goes between her sister and her sister's husband, and it's kind of like a love story, but it's also because it's exactly it's it is about kind of our connections with the earth, and um, it's very dark. It's very dark, um, and quite graphic at parts. Um, it's a bit like a landscape painting. The way she writes, it's so full of color and images, and a lot of it is like maybe like a still life as well. She kind of has these scenes and she sets you there and you watch from afar. Um, and it's not always moving along. I thought it was a great book. It just didn't affect me as much as I thought it was going to. You can't really fault her on her writing. Again, as I said, it's very beautiful the way she writes. Her style is very interesting, it's very new, it connects to greater themes, it serves a purpose, with gender, environment, her use of the environment to explore greater issues with what it means to be a woman in South Korea. I'm not very up to date or in the know about the state of politics history in South Korea, but if I can guess, it's anything like most countries in the world. It's been a difficulty for women to find their voice and their freedom, etc. And this sense that animals are commodified and eaten and taken and had without a question seems to be a reflection of Young Hai's sense of, well, Young Hai's disturbance about how she exists in the world, what she means to people, what she does. I was more intrigued by her sister, and I found that I felt pretty indifferent to Young Hai, but I think that's purposeful. You kind of she feels displaced in the book, and I think that's because she feels displaced in the world. But I just would have wanted to be able to have more of a readerly dialogue with Young Hai, considering she is kind of the central protagonist. She is the axis upon which the whole story turns. And I did feel like male voices in this story were sometimes stronger and more convincing. I found the women to be quite silent, but it's not written from a first person perspective. It's kind of an observational piece, so that confused me a little bit. But overall, I thought it was really good. Um, a really quick read. It's about 180 pages. So, yeah, I would recommend. Um, I mean, I think it's always good to try read contemporary fiction that is, you know, finding a very strong footing in the literary landscape and winning awards, seeing what does well, etc. Especially if you're like aspiring to write or all these things. So yeah, I thought that was great. I'll quickly talk about what I'm reading currently. It was crazy. I just spilt my whole smoothie and then spilt it again. I'm trying to take some books off my desk. That was so annoying. Oh my god. Okay, so what I'm currently reading is Tender as the Night, F. Scott Fitzgerald. I have only ever read The Great Gatsby, and my dad loves A Diamond as Big as the Ritz. I've never read that. I'm about 81 pages in. I love it. I'll give my feedback once I finish it, but I'm loving it. I think it's fantastic. Um, yeah, wow. It is quite like wow. Okay, so on my to be read for the month of December, apart from that, is I want to read some more literature on religion. So there's a bit of a non-fiction focus for this month, but I have two books that I want to read, and we'll see how it goes. I've been really interested in faith, what it means. It's obviously one of the most dominating kind of ideas and conversations you can have in your human existence. What does it mean to be here? Why am I here? Is there anything beyond us? All these things. Is there life after death? And I think it's something that has been so critical in my mind recently, just like a really crucial point of conversation, I guess. And so um, I started reading The God of Surprises. I'm only about halfway through that. That's like a Christian book, but it's kind of talking about how we conceive of God and stuff. Because I want to read from both sides. So I have Philip Pullman's The Good Man Jesus and The Scoundrel Christ. Um, it's a I think it is fiction, but or maybe not. I think it is fiction. Sorry, I thought it was non-fiction, but it's very popular. I found it at a secondhand bookshop, so I just thought I'd pick it up. But I thought it'd be a really interesting read. And then I have Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion. Um, this has been something that has persisted in my mind for many years because my A level teacher, 4 years ago now, um, philosophy teacher gave it to me to read, and I never got around to it. Um, but obviously, he's a staunch atheist, and I think this will be interesting. He is perhaps the most famous of them all. So yeah, those are on my kind of um, informative reads. Then I got this book a couple months ago when I was at home. Um, it's not a book; it's a collection of poems by Leonard Cohen. Um, but I I got it because my I was doing this short story slam thing. My aunt did a story, and at the end of it, she quoted some lines from Leonard Cohen, and I thought they were so beautiful. So I'm just very excited to read this, but I haven't started yet. And then this one is an autobiography, kind of. It's about her mum and her, so it's like a memoir basically. It's a memoir. Um, so this is a memoir that I got at the National Theatre, um, and I thought it looked very beautiful. Kind of explores her relationship with her mother, who I think got dementia, and like goes back and explores her mum's past and her childhood, and yeah, I think this will be super interesting. So I've got these four to read this month, but poetry, even though you have to reread it like 5 times, reading it for the first time will go by quite fast. I've already started this, and I think these will be the most challenging. Um, well, especially the God Delusion. But anyway, we'll see. Thank you for tuning in.